introduce our presenter today. Today we have Susan Sorensen, who is a certified research administrator with over a decade of experience in research administration and business analysis. Her research experience at Drexel University and Johns Hopkins taken her through both departmental and central research offices in pre- and post-award functions. And during her time there, Susan implemented both institutions on early versions of Kuali Research and continues to work with our current Kuali customers. Susan is also very active with the Kuali COIAS community and serves as the pre-award subcommittee chair. So with that, Susan, I would like to turn it over to you for today's presentation.
Hi, Dave. Thanks for the nice introduction. Today we wanted to talk about proposal hierarchy because I know a lot of people have heard of it before but aren't really sure what it entails, and it's actually a very useful functionality, although you might not find yourself using it every day. In those tricky situations, it's pretty helpful. So now whenever you meet a fellow researcher and you're talking about it, you can say, yes, I know what proposal hierarchy is, and I've seen the demo and I did one on my own, and you'll feel great about it. So basically, the way that this came about was that research offices realized that they couldn't exactly mimic what needed to be done for certain really complex budgets or proposals in the system, and so we developed a new way using proposal hierarchy to allow you to connect multiple proposals together into one rolled up proposal, one master proposal that can be submitted to reflect accurately what's going to your sponsor. And the main reasons why we wanted to do this was that it would give you better control, that specifically meaning that you can control different aspects of the budget better, but then also to allow more people to have discrete control of their separate sections. And that can be really useful, especially in situations where you have fringe or indirect costs that vary based either by departments or schools, and both of these schools or departments within your Kuali research solution are in the system but maybe have different rates, so we can connect those different rates in different proposals up to one primary proposal that gets submitted. So that's really helpful. And then the other example here is where you might have a more complex budget because you have a specific rate, negotiated rate, that's been included for one activity type and a different rate for a different activity type, but that your particular submission will have both of those activity types over the life of this proposal. So the primary example of that always comes to everyone's mind are the NIH kangaroo proposals, the K99 R00s. So we'll be looking at those two. And then another situation where it's sometimes hard to manage if you have just one proposal and you want to have separate discrete core budgets or task orders that reflect exactly what's going to be happening in just that sub-part of the budget. And perhaps you have a different person who's in charge of that discrete task, that by using the proposal hierarchy solution, you can give access to just that discrete budget with just that small subset of money to the particular person who's going to be performing that task, and then roll it up into the main proposal that gets submitted with all of those dollars rolling up to the main proposal, and allowing that person below that to have the ability to manipulate those figures as they need for their specific sub-budget. So that's the general reason why we came up with this type of solution. That said, before we go in and really look at the demonstration of how you would perform this, I thought it'd be helpful to give you some overarching concepts before we jump in and do the demo. So as I was talking about before, you really have like a master proposal by the end of this, which is the final thing that gets submitted or reflects your submission, and that you can have as many different child proposals as it takes to meet that need. So in this case, we're going to be looking at just having 2 different child budgets and rolling those up into one parent budget. But you could have, and in some cases, some schools do have up to 30 different budgets, 30 different small proposals under here that roll up into one master proposal that's submitted and is very accurate, even though you have this huge, huge, huge budget with all of these different factors in it, with different rates and fringe and all of those things. So that's the general concept that we're following along with. And some of the things that you'll need to keep in mind as we go into this process are that each budget is going to be housed within a separate proposal. That proposal chooses one of the budgets. That proposal then links up to the parent proposal, sending the budget from the child proposal up to the parent to create one master parent proposal that's submitted. And as we stated before, you can link as many of these other little proposals, these child proposals, up to a master parent, and that if you make changes along the way, you can always go back and sync those changes up to make sure that the parent has the most accurate information at your time of submission. With that in mind, it is sort of a complex amount of information that you're managing. And we want to try to make it as simple as possible and with as little amount of problems coming along the way as possible. So because of that, after a proposal is linked up to a hierarchy with one parent at the top of all of those, the child proposals will be locked out of doing certain functionality. And that includes your certifications for the personnel and your questionnaires. And for management purposes, any attachment that appears in more than one of the proposals is going to be only manageable after it's linked up to this hierarchy at the parent level. And if you think about that, it really makes sense. How else would you be able to make sure all of those attachments that appear in all of those proposals are in sync? Well, what you do is you manage it at the parent then. So those are some things to keep in mind. And I keep mentioning this word linking and syncing, and to help illuminate this a little bit more. The linking process is the very first step that you would take and that we will take here in a few minutes, where you take one of those child proposals and you link it up to the parent proposal, and then you can take another child proposal and link that up to the parent proposal. And you'll see that that can actually happen from either direction. So the child can link to a parent, or the parent proposal can say, oh, I know a child that I need to include under this proposal, and you can link that child proposal to the parent. So it sounds like a lot of relationship going on here, but remember, it's just that simple funnel structure with the main parent proposal at the top and any children under that connecting to that parent, and that the actions here, the linking or syncing, can happen from either direction. One of the other interesting things that happens at the time of linking is that any information that happens at the parent level related to the narrative types and the possibility of narrative type selections will then filter down all the way through to a connected child proposal. So we'll look at that in a few more minutes here, but the reason why I'm raising this is because we're talking about demonstrating a K99 ROO submission, in which case, if you were to be doing a system-to-system submission, you would need all of those very specific PHS forms that you need to fill in, and that by having that connected at the parent level, it does make those forms available to any child proposal that's connected. So that's very important when we think about the management aspect of this hierarchy structure outside of the world of budgeting. When we think about those narratives, it's important. Okay, so let's go ahead and get in and see what this really looks like. Now, in the interest of time, I did create an initial proposal. So We're not going to walk through every little step of how you would create the proposals. You've seen those before. Many of you have done them before. We have webinars that you can look at in the past on how to create proposals. This is really going to be focusing in much more around the specific functionality of creating that hierarchy, linking that hierarchy, or syncing that hierarchy. So I'm going to begin by looking for a proposal that I've already created. And I didn't want that to be that. I wanted it to just be new. Okay. So right now, this is just a proposal, just any old proposal that you've created. And I know that I want this to be a proposal that generates or initiates my parent proposal. And so you would choose, out of all the proposals that relate to this project, all of the child proposals, one of those proposals will begin the process by generating a parent proposal. And I can see that this proposal is not already a part of one of these hierarchy features by looking on the top action line here and looking at hierarchy, and it just says hierarchy. If this were the parent, there'd be a little P next to it. If this was a child proposal in a hierarchy, there'd be a little C next to it. So you'll see how this changes in just a second as I initiate and create a proposal hierarchy by creating the parent. So I have two options here: to link to a child, or link this child to a parent, because it understands right now that this is not a child proposal currently, or I can create the hierarchy. Before I do that, you'll notice that there is a requirement around choosing how the budgets merge. If you use your drop-down list, you'll see that there's a sub-budget and a sub-project. So these concepts, again, can be a little bit confusing. I'll just throw out a blanket statement that most of the time, in most situations, most people want a sub-budget. And that's because it takes all of the details of each proposal, and it takes those expenses, those line item expenses, those object codes, however you're familiar with talking about them, and it takes those specific details and puts those into the parent budget. Whereas if you're doing a sub-project, that's going to roll up the summary of each child proposal's budget into one parent budget. So you'll just see the total amounts coming up to the parent rather than all of those nice detailed expenses. Okay, so then I create the hierarchy. And I get a confirmation message. This tells me my new parent proposal number. So this was generated automatically for me, and it will look very similar to the proposal that I'm in right now, since there's no other child proposal connected to it. And on this page, it also updates to let me know that the proposal that I'm in right now is now considered a child proposal. You've created a hierarchy. A hierarchy exists because the parent proposal has just been generated automatically for you, and that because it's a hierarchy, this proposal is considered a child then. So I can then either go out and do a search for this particular proposal, the parent, or now that it's part of a hierarchy, I can also look under the summary submit, and there would be an option there to view the hierarchy as well. So many of you are familiar with our summary submit page, and you would know that along all these tabs, there's great quick access to information, and included in that now, since this is part of a hierarchy, is the hierarchy tab. This is a great feature because it lets you keep track of how all of those different proposals relate to one another, so it's almost like the Medusa functionality, in that it shows you how each of these relate to one another, and it shows you quick navigable access between those. So I'm in this child proposal, but if I quickly want to get into my parent proposal, I can just click View Document, and it'll take me into that new parent proposal. And so as you can see, this is looking almost exactly like the child proposal over here, because it pulled in all of the information that I added before. I'm going to go ahead and update my title of the project here so that as we look at this in the future, you'll be able to see the differences between the different proposals that I'm in quickly. And that's how I can navigate through my proposal. If I choose the Key Personnel section, you'll see that the personnel that is added in the child proposal will also appear in the parent proposal. So this is my parent with Audrey and Claudia, and here's my child. And in the child should also be Audrey and Claudia. We had mentioned before that when you have a proposal in the hierarchy, it will make it so that you cannot certify personnel in the child proposal. And so we got a little red message here to let us know that. And it also blocks out any selections. Whereas on the parent, you'll see that I can answer my questions as usual here. So that does mean that when it comes time to do certifications, you would either fill those certifications in at the parent, or you can send notification to those key personnel and have them certify, and those answers come back to the parent. We were also going to talk about how when you make a connection to a system-to-system opportunity at the parent, that it then updates your child to show the attachment types that are relevant in that scenario so that it filters down to your child proposal. So here I just have a couple of attachments into my child proposal, and if I chose to add another attachment, just my basic generic attachments. But if on my parent, and I'm sorry, I know this is a lot of flipping around back and forth between the two, but you can always keep an eye out for the hierarchy icon in the top to see that I'm in actually the proposal that I'm saying I'm in. So when you're in your parent, you can find an opportunity. And we'll just use that one. And my connection has successfully happened at my parent with all of my appropriate forms. And that at my child, see, I'm in my child now, if I come back and update this with a save, and I add my attachments, all of those PHS attachments now appear as available at the one child that I've connected so far. If I want them to be available at another child, I would just go back out, and I'm going to find a proposal. So I'll go back out to my search screen. So here, let me close this one. Search for a different proposal that I'd created already. And remember, this proposal is not going to be in my hierarchy yet. I haven't done anything with it, so this is just another proposal to link up to the hierarchy. And for this other proposal, it is listed as the activity type of fellowship postdoc. So it's going to have a different activity type from my other child proposal. And that I have a slight difference in personnel. So for my fellowship, I'm going to have a mentor of Faye Headley on it, as well as my PI of Audrey. and that I'm now going to connect up to that hierarchy that was created. I'm going to follow the same process, and you can either add the number in directly here if you know what it is, or you can use the search button to find the parent proposal. So the nice thing about doing this linking from the child proposal is that if you scroll to the bottom under hierarchy status, if you already have the parent created, you can change the status to parent, and it'll give you a much smaller result set. So many parents. Okay, and did I write down my parent number? It was 1647. There it is. And I'll select. And I still need to choose my hierarchy budget type. Again, choosing the same type that I chose the first time that I created my hierarchy. And then I'll link this child to the parent. And I'm in that proposal. Okay, so I need to close out of that. And I'll do the same process again. There we go. I get my confirmation message to let me know that the child's been linked up to the parent. My icon next to the hierarchy tells me that this is a child now. And if I go into my attachment section, it too will have updated with the attachments for my system-to-system submission. And so one of the other things that I kept talking about when we were looking at the slides is how important it is, especially when it comes to doing complex budgeting. So let's take a moment now and look at our budgets. So I am in my child proposal for the postdoc fellowship. And so I have an instructional budget. I can open that up. And we'll look at all of my expenses here. So for this first proposal that I'm doing, my instruction is going to be for year 1 and 2. I added supplies for those, and then I did the same thing for my personnel, adding my personnel for years 1, for my postdoc, as well as the mentor. Same for year 2. But then nothing for years 3, 4, and 5. So in your kangaroo situation, I'm going to be doing my instruction through year 2, and then after that they'll begin the process of becoming a full-time faculty and applying for tenure eventually and all that kind of stuff. So to help them with that, they need years 1 and 2 funding for the instructional purposes, and they need to have that other budget on my other proposal for years 3, 4, and 5. So let me go back to my other budget. Move this down so we can look at them together. And this is my normal research budget. So my activity type is research. If I look at my budget here, you'll see that this budget does not have the salary of instruction for the postdoc in the first 2 years. So 1 and 2 are empty. And then starting in period 3, this is when they're going to be faculty but non-tenured, and that they will have a co-PI in this case, and their co-PI is going to be someone that in this case, just for my example, has more experience than they do, but it's going to be working on the same project with them. So that'll be for periods 3, 4, and 5. And the non-personnel cost follows the same pattern. No expenses in the first year, and then some money added to 3, 4, and 5. And that, oh, I did want to show you the rates. So let's look at the rates for these as well. Sorry about that. Go back into this budget. And for each of my child budgets, it's hard to say things like that because it's so grammatically incorrect, but we're calling them child. So in each child budget, you'll see that you have your rates as defined by where they are. So this is my research F&A. And in my other child budget, I have my fellowship postdoc F&A. And so there are different rates being calculated on those. And so any of your rates, whether that be the fringe, the inflation, etc., that those can all be totally different in these different child proposals, but it'll make sense and it'll align correctly when it rolls up into your hierarchy budget at the parent level. So now that I'm back in one of my child proposals, I'm going to look at the summary submit page, navigate out to my parent proposal, and show you how they look. So in each proposal, whether it's child or parent, you'll still always have this hierarchy tab. You can expand the hierarchy and see an overview of all of these features within the hierarchy. So this is, again, a really helpful tool when it comes time to viewing each of the budgets, each of the proposals in the hierarchy to make sure that they have the information that you need. So I could open up the investigator units and see that those are different for each of these child proposals. I could open up the budget and see that those are different for each of these child proposals. And that's really what I wanted to do here right now, is open up the budget summaries for each of these to show you how they look. So this top one here is under my parent proposal. And I have funding for year 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 completely filled in, even though each of my child proposals didn't have full funding for each of those years. So for example, in year 1, I have $79,000, and the first child that's listed here under the budget summary does not have anything under period 1, but my second child has that $79,000. And that's going to be for both your directs and your F&As. And then for period 3, my total budget is 58. And for my child budget for period 3, my total budget is the 58. So when we're looking at this, you can see that for one of my projects, this one is my child for the ROO portion, the general research, that it's calculating my F&A costs as the MTDC, but for my child proposal on just the instruction, I actually don't have any rates set up for that one, but it does show that it's not calculating any amount because of that. There's no rates, there's no amount, and that does show you the difference between those two, that I can be entirely different with how they handle the calculation of indirect costs, inflation, fringe on each of these budgets can be totally different. Okay, and then we also wanted to talk about how we can do the syncing between these different proposals up to the parent proposal. So let me open the parent very quickly just to show you what we have there. Right now, as far as our attachments go, when we connected initially to our second child proposal, it brought forward some of these PHS forms that I had added there. And let's see, it looks like I didn't add an appendix for the career. So let me go ahead and add a career appendix. And let's say that, oh, maybe I also didn't add goals and objectives. That would probably be a better one. So we'll add the goals and objectives to my proposal that is at the postdoc level. So this proposal is the parent proposal. This proposal is my child proposal with the research. And 1646 is my postdoctoral part of the proposal. So 1646, I believe, is the other one. So I'll return to my proposal. 1646, great. Okay, so then I'll go to my attachment section. And in my attachments, I'm going to add the goals. Oops. Let me figure out which folder this is in. So then goals and save. Okay, so then the first one that's added here is my careers, goals, and objectives to fill in the candidate information and goals category type. And that I can then either sync this up from the child or the parent, as we saw before. And I want to make sure that I'm not in that one. So I'm just in the other child. Okay. So I'm in the one with the careers, goals, and objectives, candidate information, goals. If I look at my hierarchy button here at the top, that's where I can click it. And just like with the syncing functionality and the linking functionality, they're both in the same area. And this time I just choose sync. And it'll pull that up to my parent proposal. I can confirm that by going back out to my summary submit to see the hierarchy panel, or if I knew the proposal number off the top of my head, I could just do a normal search for that other proposal. And I click View Document. I'm now in my parent proposal, and I can look at the attachments. And you'll see all of my attachments are here, including the new one for the candidate information and goals. And so when the time comes, I would finish off all the details that I needed to for each of the proposal budgets. If there are certain things that exist in more than one proposal budget, I had said that in that case, here, let me go back, that you would need to do that at the parent only. And so if you come in here at the parent, I'll give you a little demonstration of what I meant there. In this case, I had Audrey Martin as the PI on both projects, so she had actually included her biosketch on each of those, and I have a little message here to remind me that if that attachment appears in more than one proposal and the attachment type is single, such as the biosketches are, then you'll have to manage that at the parent proposal, as we're doing here. So I could come in and I can make a change and say, oh, it's actually current pending support, and then that would be something I can do here at the parent proposal. I'm going to change that back, though. Whereas if I did that at the child proposal, or at least I attempted to do that at the child proposal, you'll see that it gives me a message to let me know that that's not a possibility here. So Audrey's on all my other proposals, so more than one, and because of that, I cannot edit the attachment at the child level. It's not giving me any of those options to change the type or delete or change the details. That has to be done at the parent. And you'll see that the reverse of that is actually also true. So for Faye, she's only on one particular proposal, and that means that I need to be managing that on the one proposal instead. That it gives me that ability to make her adjustments here on our child proposal. So I can understand that sometimes that management part of the process could be a little bit confusing, but we do leave messages throughout the system to let you know where those types of activities should take place. So you shouldn't be in the dark about that, even if you're not familiar with the proposal hierarchy and how it works. And again, the general concept behind that is that it's just too hard for the system to be able to figure out exactly which one is the most recent one and should it update and replace the other ones on the other child proposals. It just makes more sense and is cleaner if we manage those at the parent level instead. So on that parent proposal, you can also add any other attachments. So if for some reason on this particular proposal, on our K99 ROO, nobody ever entered in that career appendix, I can come in here and I can add it to the parent proposal. So where's my appendix? Oops, that's right. There we go. And you can also manage the statuses as you would at any other proposal in the same fashion here at the parent. We also would fill in our questionnaire at the parent level. So in this case, it is a system-to-system submission. And so our questionnaire will have the additional questionnaires that relate to my system-to-system submission. So I have a cover page supplement questionnaire, and I have my normal system-to-system questionnaire that are being triggered by the fact that I'm going to be submitting these directly to grants.gov. And those would be answered here at the parent. So I think that we've walked through all of the different steps of how you would manage your proposal in a hierarchy. So I think that opens up our time now to talk through any questions that you have.
Great. Thank you, Susan. There is a lot of material there. You covered a ton of ground. We do have a few questions that came in. Any of you who have other ones, please take this time to add them now. It's not too late. And we'll walk through as many of them as we can. Again, we have recorded this webinar, so we'll make this link available to you. You can refer to it later or share it with any of your colleagues that you need to. And any questions we can't get to, we'll provide answers to all those after the webinar. All right, so with that, Susan, here we go. Can you give an example of when a sub-project hierarchy would be used instead?
So if you were going to be using the proposal hierarchy feature as a to get general information that then is going to be submitted as a summary in our system, that could be a reason why you build out those budgets in each of the child proposals, but then roll it up to a sub-project parent. So it would still be calculating correctly at each of the child proposal levels. It would tell you what the correct indirect costs are and what the correct fringe are, but it would roll up such that you just have that summary level. And so if you were doing one of those types of budgets where you're not actually going to be doing a system-to-system or something like that, and you just need to know that those amounts are absolutely correct for each one, that's probably the easiest way to manage it in that case.
Okay.
But frankly, most of the time it will be a sub-budget instead.
I have two questions here that look related to me. If people have certified in a child proposal that is then used to generate a parent, or then linked to a parent, do those completed certifications carry into the parent?
So no, those completed certifications wouldn't fill in automatically at the parent, and because of that, we do recommend that you wait to do the certifications at the closer to the end of your process, because we do have that so that they are locked out earlier.
Okay. And I think that answers the other question. I'm going to ask it just to make sure. So the other related question was, must the certification questions be done at the parent? I might be doing the child with my PI and want to have them certify without the owner of the parent having to track down my PI certifications. But it sounds like they need to certify at the parent.
They do, and in that case, to make it less onerous, we do recommend you use the notification, the PI certification notification feature, to send that out directly from the parent proposal, so that even though you might be responsible for a child proposal, that the person at the parent doesn't have to say, you know, like, I know this particular investigator and I'm managing whether or not they've certified. They can just send that out to everyone who's listed on the project and have them get direct access to that particular proposal's certification page. So it really is actually very seamless when you do it that way.
Okay. All right, another question. Are there best practices, or would you recommend the best way to have started or completed in a child proposal? So what is best to have started and or completed in a child before generating the parent or linking the child?
Oh, that's a really good question. So from my perspective, and this is relating to my experience, but if you get in here and you play with it a little bit, you might have a different experience and you might suggest different things, and we can certainly have discussions about those later so that you can share them with the rest of the Kuali community as well. But my experience is that it's easiest to manage if you have as much of your budget in place as possible up front, and that you definitely want to make sure that your general proposal details, that general proposal information, matches up with what you want the parent proposal to be at the time of generating the parent. So from that initial generation period, it'll pull forward your organization information, for example. And if you're on a multi-campus where it would show potentially different information in that organization section, you would want to make sure that you have the child proposal that will feed up and generate the parent proposal as the one with that organization information filled in before you generate the parent proposal, so that it does show the campus that you intend to be submitting through. So that would be something important to consider. And then it's often easiest if you allow the investigators, the key personnel on the project, to manage their own biosketches. So in many cases, you wouldn't grant that level of access at the parent, even though you certainly could. In many cases, people don't, and because of that, you would also probably want to make sure that you have those added as soon as you can before you parent, just to make it easier, but it's not limiting in any way. So you can always go back in and add that to the child proposal. The thing to keep in mind, of course, being that if that particular investigator appears on many proposals, it has to be managed at the parent, and if that investigator doesn't have access to the parent, then they would need to ask you as support staff to help with that. So those are the things that I've sort of felt my way through over time dealing with these situations, that it is often more helpful to have those determined before you create your hierarchy so that the person is in control of that at that time. And I think one last note there is that we didn't cover it, but that you can actually unlink a child from the hierarchy, and you can do any changes that you need to that child proposal, and you can relink it up again later if you need to, or if that wasn't the right proposal to be including, you can unlink it and add in a different proposal instead.
Okay. All right, thanks, Susan. A couple questions here about attachments. When you've added attachments in the child and synced, does it reorder the attachments in the parent? For example, does it add them as attachment numbers at the end or insert them randomly?
It does insert them, although not randomly. It inserts them as they appear in the child proposal section. So you'll see that all one child proposals are in order as they appear at that child, and then under that you'll see the next child's attachments in order as they appear at that child.
Okay. All right. You mentioned that we could have up to 30 child proposals as an example. Is there a limit to the number of children that you can have?
There is not, although I do not envy the people that have to manage 30 proposals at once.
Yeah, right. And hopefully it's not too many more than that. Here's one about permissions. Are any permissions defaulted in the parent or the child? For instance, does the lead proposal aggregator automatically have full access to the parent? Do any child aggregators, for example, have any edit access to the parent?
So that's actually permission driven, and there's a specific permission around proposal hierarchy access. And then, yes, the aggregator parent of the lead child will have access to the parent automatically. I hope that those of you who are unfamiliar can follow along with that logic as well as those that know enough to ask a question like that.
Well, they can always go back and listen to the recording over and over again. What happens, is there a circumstance, and what happens if the budget periods for a child proposal are different than those of the parent?
So right now, those two things do have to be aligned, which was why when you looked at my child proposals, even though my one budget didn't actually start adding expenses until the third period, I did include the prior periods in my budget without any expenses added to them. But that's something that we're looking forward to modifying in the future.
Okay. And here's my last question so far. If you add proposal attachments at the parent level, will it or can it sync to the children?
It cannot and it will not, Sam, I am, because it wouldn't know which child to include it with, and if you included it on all the children, it would sort of be granting excess access to people that maybe shouldn't have access to that particular attachment. But it's funny that you mentioned that, because when you said that, it also actually brought to mind the workflow and how I didn't really give a display of the workflow, but it does take the child workflows and merge them into the parent. So if I'm at the parent here and you look at my summary submit page, then on this page we have the ability to look at the route log, which is how we see and manage our workflow. And in the route log, it will have all of the child proposal routing merged up into one, as you would expect, so that you can see that everyone who would have been included in that proposal, were it not in a hierarchy, is still included in the proposal workflow here. So I had 2 child proposals with 3 different PIs, and all of those PIs are now showing here, and that continues forward as well with all of the department chairs, admins, etc. So that was something else that sort of relates to permissions, because these are people that need to have access to the proposal at the time of approval. So.
Okay. Well, those are all the questions I have right now. Those are great questions. Susan, thank you for taking the time to do this for us. Again, everybody, the presentation has been recorded, and we will make the link available to you in the next day or two. And I hope we get to see all of you in San Diego at Kuali Days. We're all really looking forward to it. It's going to be a great event this year. So hopefully we'll see you then. Thank you very much, everybody. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thanks. Bye.